It's a little bit weird to be on video.
Is it?
I mean,
It doesn't feel different to me. We're just sitting here having the same conversation on the same sides of the table. Like, it's all good.
I'm very aware of all my fidgeting.
Well, maybe it'll help you be less fidgety.
And product placement. Shane's wearing a Black Rifle Coffee t-shirt.
Yeah, very comfy. I'm really into heathered tees. I think most people, if you got to be honest with yourself, like those t-shirts that are 100% cotton or real thick and everything, they're not your favorite t-shirts.
Yeah, no, that's actually the only thing that I am upset at Justin Amash for. I bought one of his t-shirts because he's awesome, and it's one of those like gilding 100% cotton.
Oh, it just
horrible things.
It makes you just sweat.
I never wear it.
That's
and it's got
crazy.
The sleeves are like rectangular.
Yeah, and the thing is like, and in the bottom, like this part down here, it always bunches up when you record or when you wash it. Yeah, when you're.
It's not fitted. It's like for.
Yeah, I can't.
Bigger people.
I can't do it. But with that, you saw the first iteration of Rebellion t-shirts.
I did. You made them on Amazon merch.
Yeah,
which might be something we use, and it's pretty cool.
Amazon merc.
Amazon is kind of a mercenary. I mean, that they're just like, hey, we'll sell it. You're buying, we'll sell it.
the perfect market.
I just saw today that they own a pharmacy company.
Really?
It's called PillPack.
Like they've made everything else so much better. It's one of those things where I kind of wonder, like in the future, if like Amazon's one of those people that is, kind of like the Facebook or the Twitter of the retail.
Aren't they already?
Well, they are, but like if now you get too heavily dependent on them, you can still go out to other places and get your things. But what if they won't sell to people in the future because of social scores and things like that, because of what we're going to get to in the program later.
So Gary Vee talks about it all the time. He's like, hey, now it's using all the other sellers to build itself up. But do you know the value of having your thing sponsored by Amazon? And you know how quickly Amazon is being like, you know what? We'll just make an Amazon basics of everything.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to push first.
Yeah.
So all the other people are, too bad.
So sad.
It's why everybody, whatever they're doing, if you own a business, if you have a podcast, you should not rely just on external platforms. You should have your own website. And our website is rebellionpod.com.
It is. But it's sponsored through Lisbon, correct?
It is, but it's still our own. Like we own all the stuff that's on it. And even if they told us to go away, we'd still have that same website we could put somewhere else.
I'll tell you what, managing this thing as it grows, because of everything that you do and then everything that I do on the side, where we don't know everything that even the two of us are doing. Like this is going to, it's going to grow fantastically, and keeping the reins on it is going to be an interesting.
It's not just us though. We have Gina who does most of our art.
Yeah.
So it's a 3-person venture at this point.
But it's go. I'll tell you, with the feedback that we're getting, it's going great, and just want to say thanks to everybody out there. I'm not going to use this listener's name. I don't think at all. It's one of those things where she wrote to me after the Recruiter podcast.
We got a lot of comments on that.
Yeah, I got a lot of messages, especially from vets. And this one kind of sums up, I want to say, probably most of them. And I wanted to take a second and read this, because this type of feedback is really cool to have. And, going out on a limb sometimes and pushing that edge to see, it's not, I hate to even say pushing the edge. It's just being, that truth, telling type person where you're doing something because you care about people, right? Like that's, but it ruffles feathers. Like there's still, one way or another, you're going to get some blowback. But I'll tell you, for the most part, this is what we got. This is from one of our listeners. They write, I listened to the Recruiter episode. I've been out for 5 years. It's the first time I've been able to fully put into words or fully understand how I felt my first 3 years out. And I wish someone would have had that conversation with me. I probably would have joined anyway, but I can't help but feel I would have been more prepared for the aftermath. I wasn't in a combat MOS, but I still remember all the close calls I had on convoys and foot patrols at the Syria-Iraq border. It doesn't matter what MOS is or what your job is supposed to be once you're downrange. All bets are off and no one is safe. Deployments do change you forever, and the feeling after you return to the civilian world, that feeling of loneliness, not being able to relate to anyone, not wanting to talk about it because no one really cares, all that shallow societal expectations of quote unquote TYFYS, and I don't know exactly what that means, but for people who don't know, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and I am glad you have such an amazing support system to help you along the way. This country needs more people like you and Banks. You are and will continue to be a leader of the liberty movement, and you will be a ripple that causes a wave. That's man, I'll tell you what, that's a cool thing to hear from a listener.
That's very humbling, and I think there are people out there who care. At least I care. And the TYFYS is thank you for your service, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I just looked it up.
We're learning,
thank you, Google.
We're learning
Actually,
so much today.
Thank you, DuckDuckGo,
yeah.
which I try to force myself to use, even though it's not as pretty or I'm not as used to it.
Yeah.
But
DuckDuckGo, huh? I haven't been on that one yet. I've seen it.
We should get the founder of DuckDuckGo to come on the show.
Oh, if anybody,
explain it. I do not know him.
Oh,
but I mean, with our
we know people who know people. Everybody
knows. 262 followers on Twitter, we can tweet at him and he'll just be so impressed.
Perfect. I'll use my dwindling account to do it. But do you want to get into today's show? You got anything else over there before we get started?
No, I think we can get into it. We've mentioned it at least twice on previous podcasts, most notably on Monday's podcast where we had Derek on. This is it's a subject mostly about one bill that was introduced by a Georgia State House rep. His name is Representative Andy Welch. Remember that name. Never vote for him ever again. He's been in there for, I think, 4 or 5 terms. He's resigning now. I don't know if he'll ever run for anything else. I hope not.
Especially after this debacle.
But he introduced a bill called the Ethics in Journalism Act. And there are a few there's a bill or a resolution in the Peachtree City Council that kind of is about the same subject. And we're just going to go and talk about how the government should not be involved in journalism.
At all.
Or, for that matter, in ethics, because they're pretty bad at it.
And we're going to talk about some other things along with that.
There's some zuck.
Part of our prep here in what we do is we do prep on a subject. We don't necessarily tell each other everything that we're thinking about talking about during the show, which I think keeps it kind of interesting and just keeps going.
I mean, I'd prefer to be prepared on everything, but Shane just likes to surprise me and throw me off my game.
Yeah. So you wanted to get into the meat and potatoes of this bill, the Ethics in Journalism Act?
Yeah, so I actually did a little analysis of the bill, but here's the highlights. It was introduced by 6 Republicans. So you got Andy Welch, Mark Newton, Ron Stevenson, Mike Chokas, Rick Jaspers, and Tim Barr. Remember that last name, Barr. Usually, good things are not attached to it.
From my hometown, yeah.
Really?
Lawrenceville.
Interesting. So it would create a 9-member journalism ethics board who would be responsible for accrediting journalists and media organizations, investigating and sanctioning journalists after complaints are filed by the public, accepting and managing grants, donations, and gifts or other monetary rewards. I like the word rewards. That's actually the word in the bill itself. And then setting rules and standards to adhere. So it's like the canons of ethics of journalism.
Listen to that. The canons of the ethics of journalism. Something that can, like in canon, it cannot be rebuked. That is a serious term, Banks.
So it's not only that. It's not like not that they should. It's not like they established these canons or these rules or these procedures. They said, hey, we're going to tell you guys how to pick this board, which is a whole nother story. And then you guys are going to set all this up for yourselves. So empowering 9 people to just have full leeway with the backing of the government. What could go wrong, Shane?
Oh my gosh. I mean, 1984, Brave New World. I mean, we've got a myriad, just cornucopia of examples to point to in not only, quote unquote fictional type history, right? But also real history where governments around the world, one of their first steps in absolute atrocities, and I mean mass genocides and things like that, is removing the ability to criticize the government.
Oh, but no. Hold on, Shane. This is only This is to develop a voluntary accreditation process. They're not trying to take away our First Amendment rights. This would just be a stamp of good housekeeping for smaller blog type websites. So these are not words I'm making up. This is literally the words of Timothy Barr, from Shane's hometown, who's trying to defend his co-sponsorship of the bill.
Yeah, one of the journalists from the Gainesville Times put out this piece, and this little segment from it says the board would create a canons of ethics, develop a voluntary accreditation process, and receive complaints from Georgia residents about alleged ethical violations. The board would also be able to investigate accredited journalists or news organizations and issue sanctions. I mean, seriously.
But again, Shane, we're taking nobody's First Amendment rights away. It's completely voluntary. The board is made up of journalists.
That is a quote. That's a quote. The accreditation, they go on, the accreditation could be, a quote, a stamp of good housekeeping, unquote. That's, I mean, seriously, when I look at this, just on its face, just on the face, to suggest that somebody in government, like I say all the time, this is a group of people who are known to be crooks and criminals and liars.
In general.
I mean, for the overwhelming part. So we're going to have government be the people that can have people answer for complaints from just what the everyday public person.
So only people that live in Georgia, of course, because soon as you, I mean, the arbitrariness of most laws should make everybody skeptical of like, hey, why did we set that at that number? Why did we set the line here? But of course, like it wouldn't be valid if somebody from Augusta, South Carolina did it, because it'd only be valid if somebody from Augusta, Georgia did it. Like, but that's the nature of government in general.
His quote there, where it says, quote, I think it would be a good way for smaller organizations, smaller internet blog type outlets to be able to get a stamp of approval, such as, I keep referring back to, maybe a chamber of commerce.
So first thing, I don't know how a chamber of commerce is necessarily a media organization, but the problem with legislation is that the definitions don't necessarily fit the definitions of words as we understand them. It's whatever definition they put into the bill.
And it'll be so vague that they can interpret it.
I'll read the definitions here. For some reason, there's not as many definitions as I would have thought for somebody who's written bills. Like, you usually define all the words that might have contention, but they use definitions to decide who is going to be on this board. Apparently, it's journalists. So they have the definition of editor, which means somebody who decides what goes into a newscast. Definition of newscast means a broadcast or publication of reports that are published more than once a week and not limited to a single county. For now, we fit the bill. We could be on this board, and we could just shut down all the other media outlets out there.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a problem at all, right?
News producer means a current or former member of the news production team that compiles elements of video, graphic, audio, photographs, etc. And then retired professor means a former educator who taught journalism for at least 10 years. They want on their board at least, I think it's 1 or 2 professors, not that the details matter.
Yeah.
But so apparently if you're a professor for 9 years, you weren't a professor now. It shows just how government changes definitions.
That's why they call it tenure, banks. 10 years.
I just love how they don't see a problem with changing the definitions of words, because like, oh no, it has to fit the bill. We have to have standards. Well, how about you make the standards within what people can understand? And
the short-sightedness of it, man. The short-sightedness of a board of ethics for journalists. A board of ethics for anybody, for private types of organizations. And let's not beat around the bush. Journalism is the one and only profession in the United States that is protected by a codified amendment.
I almost completely disagree with that statement. So
what's that?
Here's why.
No, what are you saying?
So it's not the only. It's the only one that's codified, but it's not the only profession that is protected. If you take
and that's why I said codified.
The spirit of the Constitution and the 10th Amendment, all professions that don't harm other people are protected.
Yeah.
I actually had a conversation with Steven on Twitter, and he made that specific point. He was like, yeah, I like this, but they're saying that journalism is the only thing protected. No, it's not the only thing protected.
No, it's the only thing
all protected.
codified.
That's the problem with the Constitution, which is not perfect.
Oh, no. You need to pull up your poll.
So I did a poll on Twitter the other day. It got 744 votes, which is cool for somebody who has 180 followers. Yeah. And I gave 4 options. The question was, what do you think of the Constitution? The first one was perfect, USA, ! The second one was law of the land, respect. The third one was good tool. And the last one was feeble attempt. And I understand the 3 bottom ones. Like, it is law of the land in a certain context. It is a good tool. That was my answer. And it is a feeble attempt just by logic, because look at all the tyranny we have today, like more than before. The 26% of people who responded to perfect USA, I can respect them. I can have a civil discourse with them, but I don't understand how they can actually answer that seriously.
Was this on your
It was
personal?
My personal Twitter.
Yes.
Did you find it?
No. This is the problem I have. I have the same problem you do. When people see that the first one there, no, the Constitution's perfect, man, just look around for a second at the United States government and the bureaucracy. Who in their right mind can say that the Constitution of the United States is absolutely perfect when we live in the society that we live in these days? Like,
but it's not just that. You can read it. It's like the U.S. Postal Service is in the Constitution. The U.S. Postal Service loses 88 million packages a year.
Oh,
did you know that?
Do you know between the U.S. Postal Service and the Border Patrol and the people that run all the documentation for things like passports? Do you know how many of those get delivered to the wrong place?
Didn't your wife's get delivered to the wrong place?
Yeah. And you know what was funny is we were having conversations about it, and we just, all of a sudden, people started saying, oh, yeah, mine got delivered to the wrong place. Mine got delivered to the wrong place. Mine. You're sitting there going, this can't. No. And sure enough, of course it can. That's we need to digress. We need to come back to what we were talking about.
No, let's attack the Constitution. I'm kidding. The
Constitution obviously is never, and the thing is no piece of paper, no matter how well it is written. I won't say smartly because Banks will come across the table. The Constitution is a great tool. That's all it is. It's not the perfect document. Never, and no document will ever be perfect in terms of keeping a society in their state of liberty. It will never ever happen.
I actually expected more people to be like, "Hey, I need multiple answers here." Like that was kind of on purpose.
Yeah.
Because I think it is a feeble attempt. It also is a great tool, and it also is the law of the land, and our politicians should respect it. But I got no such comment. Which I thought was interesting. But the fact that the U.S. Postal Service loses 88 million packages a year and then sells them because, their packages are there and makes $11 million off of that should by itself prove the Constitution is not perfect. But you can actually write a piece of paper that is perfect, not in protecting liberty, but like I can take a piece of paper and write on here, liberty is good, and that will be a perfect statement. It is possible.
Yeah, I think liberty's great. So perfect statement. But
liberty is perfect.
Yeah. Timothy Barr went on to say that the current political climate, many people do not trust either the media or the government. So
seems like another reason not to put the government in charge of the
he's
media.
Contradicting himself here.
When you're wrong, you tend to do that.
Well, not only that, but when you're just being a politician without any foresight. I see this forefront and center right here in Forsyth County, even where politicians, including our local sheriff, don't look down the road in terms of implementation of processes and policies and procedures and things like that, where they're going, well, no, we'd never use traffic cameras or anything like that to track anybody outside of what we're actually looking for.
But you don't even have to go that far down the road. Like it's not like there's going to be an unintended consequence. The consequence of a seal of approval for a certain media outlet and not for another one is specifically an infringement on the First Amendment, in my opinion. So you don't even have to go down the road. Like the beginning is bad.
Yeah, but why?
Here's why. Politicians don't like things being said against them that are mean, and I have mean
anything.
Criticizing.
They don't like to be
too
criticized.
Much information, and I actually have what I would say is almost categorical proof of why this bill was introduced. Andy Welch, as I said, he had been there for 10 years. He resigned in the middle of his term now. So I guess it's 11 years he was actually in there. And he dropped this bill right before he resigned at the end of session, which was like 2 months ago. Before that, though, there was all this Ralston stuff, which if you haven't listened to episode 80, is it 4 or 5? 85. Which was Monday with Derek, you'll understand the whole Ralston thing. Andy Welch is probably the single representative who defended Ralston the most. He wrote a novel.
He came out. He just came out in swinging in defense.
He wrote a novel on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but at the end, he says, finally, the AJC and those who parrot the article without doing any independent research are only telling one side of the story. So he's talking about one article. There's actually multiple articles. One article that called out Ralston for abusing his legislative leave and being a corrupt
SOB.
Sure.
Sob.
Trying to keep it clean, man.
Sob. It's good.
Sob.
He's a sob.
Did you know that WSB interviewed Mr. Ralston for about 30 minutes on this issue, but chose to report it in the mainstream media only a fraction of the interview? That's not right. Thankfully, all of us who love liberty, the press is not our judge and jury unless you let them be. Remember how the press and those with a political agenda treated Brett Kavanaugh. So this bill would actually fix this, in his opinion, because it would force WSB at request and under the penalty of going to court and being fined $100 a day. It would force them to give the full interview to Ralston, since he was the one who was interviewed. I think this is the reason that he introduced the bill, the sole reason. And this is why my prediction that the fact that Andy Welch might get appointed to something nice and cozy goes even higher, because this is not just coming out and defending Ralston. This is coming out and defending Ralston, dropping a bill that shows even more reverence to Ralston.
Yeah. If Ralston survives, right? If Ralston survives, watch Andy Welch. Let's see where he goes real quick.
Unfortunately, I think we didn't have the conversation with Derek. I think there's a better chance of Ralston surviving.
Oh, God.
History is the best predictor of the future, and the history is that Ralston's been attacked on this since 2007.
And here's not only that, but in this political climate, the guys at the top never pay. They never, ever answer.
Yeah, we have a lot of history to show that. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, George Bush.
Clapper, Brennan, Strzok,
I was just
Page,
thinking like the most important people in the world.
Costigan, Lois Lerner. Who was the other AG during Obama?
Eric Holder.
Eric Holder. I mean, all these guys who have perjured themselves in front of Congress for some really bad stuff, man. None of them have seen the inside of a prison anywhere.
But anyways, that is why the bill was being introduced. If you'll let me, I'd like to walk through the bill itself.
Oh, sure.
Because the details...
Proceed, sir.
The details are important to understand, especially if you're discussing this with you should talk to your representative and make sure to shame them into not signing on to this bill. This has been effective sometimes, not effective enough, but we talked about a bill before that wanted to put a tax on being able to watch porn on your computer, and there was so much shaming of the politicians that they took their names off the bill, which I would hope would happen here. But it's a pretty short bill, all things considered. It's 6 pages long. It starts out with the definitions, which is wrong piece of paper. It starts out with the definitions that we talked about. It says the board can set up its own rules and regulations. Like, what could go wrong there? It doesn't surprise me that one body, the General Assembly, is like, oh, let's just give another body the same kind of rules that we like.
Yeah.
But we can still change it because we control them. So to give like little tyrants more and more power. That's how bureaucracies form. This is setting them up more bureaucracy. These are Republicans who say that they don't like red tape and bureaucracy, creating red tape
and bureaucracy. Oh, and it'll only be benevolent in our hands, ever.
Then you go to line 79, which is where the powers start, and that gives them the power to promulgate the canons of ethics, issue formal advisory opinions. So this whole thing that it's voluntary, even though it says it in here that to develop a voluntary accreditation process.
Voluntary for now.
No, my goal here is to show that as you go down the bill, it's only voluntary in name. Like most bills, like the Patriot Act has nothing patriotic to it. The Affordable Care Act, there's nothing affordable to it. There's nothing voluntary about this. And the fact that they think you're stupid enough to believe them because they use the word voluntary is stupid on their part, not completely unjustifiable because we tend to be somewhat apathetic. But you should know better.
Should throw up a flag right away when they name something, voluntary. You should sit there and go, all right, let's see where it's not voluntary in its own bill. So yeah, hit it.
So again, starting at line 79, they're giving the powers, develop the voluntary accreditation process, develop a process by which journalists and news organizations holding accreditation can be investigated and sanctioned. So that's the first part of this non-voluntary thing. Because if they can be sanctioned, are only the ones who are seeking accreditation going to be sanctioned? If they're accredited, then they're in good standing. So it would actually be the ones who are not accredited. So that would make it involuntary.
And then they can.
This is 6 lines below the word voluntary.
So we're already in a place where they can sanction people who are in the media, and sanctioning means use force against them to shut them up, possibly take their stuff, possibly throw them in a cage, and if they resist long enough, kill them.
They don't actually have all that power within here, but lower in the bill it says all that needs to be done to take out their responsibilities, which is the biggest open door in the world. Because if you're setting up your own responsibilities, and then there's a thing that says you can do whatever you want to set up to enforce the responsibilities that you have established. I don't know how more broad you could be. Hey, you can set up what you want to do, and then you can do whatever you want to set up what you want to do.
Yeah, so you open the door to a bureaucracy, and what is that bureaucracy? Well, we just need this X amount of money to do X amount
money
of
comes
things,
later.
X amount of stuff.
You're jumping way ahead of me. So sanction doesn't sound voluntary to me. Then it says that news organizations shall be accredited only if all journalists employed by the news organization are accredited. So let's say that they hate me because I've been down at the Capitol for 7 years. But they like you. We couldn't be accredited because only you would be accredited and I wouldn't.
Yeah.
So how in bed does this make the AJC? The AJC is like, oh, we have, I don't know, dozens or hundreds of employees. That's going to curtail the most powerful media outlet out there, which is probably the AJC in Georgia at this time, at least, if you take money and reach into context.
Yeah.
Anybody who starts growing is going to be worried about making sure that all their journalists comply, don't push boundaries, because one journalist pops up and doesn't get accredited, and bam, the whole organization loses accreditation. That standard, again, means that the ones that are not accredited are the ones that are going to be sanctioned, which means it's not voluntary. The lie is so in your face. I'm not sure how to deal with it. Then we have line 88. Then we have the hypocrisy, because when you're not telling the truth, you're always going to be contradicting yourself, like you pointed out, which means there's going to be hypocrisy. Line 126 gives the board full civil immunity for conduct in the course of their official duties. What they're trying to do is prevent journalists from not being ethical. If they are not ethical, and somebody has a justified course of action to be like, hey, you're doing something wrong, full immunity for them. Not only that, it doesn't just say that. It says communications to the board and its members relating to journalistic misconduct or incapacity in testimony giving at any disciplinary proceedings shall be absolutely privileged, and no civil suit predicated thereon shall be instituted or maintained against any complainant, witness, or counsel, or either.
Wow.
So they've got immunity, but they just needed to double down and make sure nothing that happens at any proceeding, anything they say, any of the witnesses they bring, so they can slander, libel, defame, which I don't think is actually a crime, which is what they would be reproaching the journalists for slander, libel, and defamation, because that's all journalists can do since they use words, their voice, and video.
Yeah, they're just telling stories.
So they can do it while trying to uphold or to reprimand journalists for doing it. It's not just it's like double triple hypocrisy.
It is double speak. It is 1984 Orwell. This is Brave New World stuff, man. I'm telling you right now, like this is awful. To even float this idea, and that's this supposedly red state down here in the South, to have people floating red flag laws, to be floating, some 1984 Orwell stuff, where we've got an Ethics in Journalism Act like this. It's a matter of time. Right now, this is a ticking time bomb. You got people out here who are doing things like this, man. It is. We'll just take a little. Let's float the idea that Overton window thing. Have you ever read that book, The Overton Window?
Yeah, by Glenn Beck.
Yeah, Glenn Beck did it a long time ago.
I got it for my birthday.
It was actually, one of those things that I had never actually heard of in terms of a strategy. And yeah, they do this all the time.
I said this on the show with Derek. Andy Welch is not stupid. He's a smart lawyer. Yeah. He's a sneaky politician. And in the way that they'll be like, oh, well, there's like just an introduction of a bill doesn't mean anything. Anybody can introduce a bill. Representative Matt Gertler can be like, we shouldn't have NFA rules on silencers. That's not going to go anywhere. Ideas have power. Ideas are actually the most potent weapons.
Yeah.
They've got some lag sometimes, but this is the introduction of the idea. And what happens in the state capitol, because of tradition and just the molasses that is the sausage factory, is the idea comes forward, and unfortunately the politicians are not just like, no, we're going to shut it down. They're like, how do we make it a little bit better? And it's introducing the possibility. It's like, oh, I understand. And then they get to have like this position of honor of like, you know what? I was wrong. This was not a bad idea. We're going to change it. We're going to make it better. And it's like, no. I want it burnt down to the ground.
We need to tweak it.
And then I want I want people to like piss on it afterwards. And then like as bad as it can get.
Yeah. And
like kill it.
I can't stand when people say there should be a law, like there should be a law for this, or there should be a law for that. I saw some ridiculous one the other day where somebody had said there should be a law against blowing your grass into the street, when you're mowing your lawn or something.
Learn to live with your neighbors.
It's like, holy hell, guys. Like, you really want to sanction government force up into the ability for the back the blue, the whole cop thing. You want to give those guys power to use such force as to kill somebody over yard clippings. That's where this country is, Banks.
But there's a more foundational and what's the word? Like heavy reason why that's a bad idea. When you put off responsibility, first thing, responsibility makes people happy. If you have purpose in doing things, I sound like Jordan Peterson now. If you have purpose in doing things, you're going to be happier. And there is some kind of natural order reason why problems are there, and you deal with problems, and then you have responsibility and you learn as an individual and as a society. If you put that off to somebody else, like a child does, like a child is not when they're young, is not looking both ways. But don't you want as soon as possible your child taking into account its own responsibility to?
I say it to my kids all the time, man.
And as soon as they learn that, aren't they more complete, more aware, safer, more responsible people?
And better to their fellow man.
So if you take away all the responsibility, which is getting along with your neighbors, protecting motorcyclists, because yard clippings in roads are the most dangerous for a motorcycle, because the grass is kind of slick on the tarmac. I used to ride. Yeah. Like that is going to create a society that is unsafe and childlike.
Well, I don't think we want. And look at us.
Yeah, we're already there, but it can get worse, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, and
in the deep, dark mind of Banks, here's all the ways it can get worse.
The conversation I always have with my kids in terms of accepting the responsibility, and as they age, we don't have to have this conversation as much, but with the younger ones now, it's pointing out what went wrong, right? Like, so let's just say they took a crayon and they drew on the wall. It hasn't happened here yet. Thank God. I think maybe I dodged it. But, let's just say that happens. The conversation is, hey man, what are you doing? And they know they've done wrong. They'll start to cry because, they're feeling, maybe that they're not in such a safe place anymore. And
you're like, there should be a law, Dad.
Yeah, there may be some retribution coming. And, the first thing out of my mouth is stop crying. You did this. You need to own this. If you don't want to be in trouble, you need to not do things like this. When you have that complete conversation with a child, most of the time it makes an impact, especially if it's one of those things where, I know a lot of people out there will get hung up on, whether it's, right to, physically correct the course of your children or not.
It's a conversation we should have one day.
Yeah, and
from one person who doesn't have children to another who does.
Right, and I will tell you, there is, in my own humble opinion, there are minor ways to do that. If you are ever going out and grabbing your kid out of anger, you're wrong. First and foremost, you need to stop. And as a child, as a parent, you got to get a hold of yourself before you ever put hands on a child ever. Like that's not right. What you have to have is a lesson ready for that type of thing. And when, if you're ever leaving marks or bruises or anything, I think you're doing it wrong. When you can actually have those conversations and really, when they do fear some type of, and I say fear, I hate to even, but when they are
the consequence of their actions.
Yeah, when they are aware that there is a consequence of their actions, and you either catch them or you find out through, investigative, parental senses and all that stuff.
It's usually pretty blatant.
Yeah, it is. And you kind of say, you have this conversation. They know there's going to be a repercussion. To sit there in a calm way and walk them through the thought process of everything that you're thinking and everything that they were thinking in the lead up to this moment. And then, for what course this charts for them going down the road in terms of human beings, right? Like, in the case of drawing on a wall, like if I go over to my neighbor's house with a can of spray paint and then just start painting on the side of his house, he's going to be really mad at me, isn't he? Right? And that's what happens. That's exactly what happens.
I hope Scotty's listening to this.
Yeah, my kids, a lot of times, once you get to the point where you're projecting it to yourself, doing something to another human being's property, some kind of destructive or malicious or just bad behavior, man, that light bulb goes on. And I go, I get it. And then, the apology most of the times comes depending on whatever personality I'm dealing with down there. But it's
your kids definitely have three different and distinct.
But that's the way I do it, and for the most part, man, I think I think most people think they have pretty good kids, but that's one thing that I pride myself and my wife on, is that, hey, listen, there's a process and a procedure to this. And if you mess this up, there's going to be ramifications for them later in life. So
your kids are pretty awesome, but just putting that over society and seeing the same consequences, potential consequences, and the ones we see today of society not learning how to act in a civil manner to where we can all just get along. And even though it's been
just have some respect,
even though it's broken down so much, we usually just get along with people.
Yeah. Because people don't want confrontation more than anything.
Yeah,
it's funny, when we go back to this, there are people fighting this, Banks. There is the Georgia chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists that has denounced this bill.
He has a great quote, if I
understand. The quote is, "The bill is clearly meant to intimidate journalists and chill the important work of holding powerful people and organizations accountable for their actions." He goes on, "The bill would also hold journalists to a higher standard than the legislators who are proposing it." Of course. I'm glad
nobody gives away their power voluntarily.
I'm glad
they take away power from other people.
I'm glad to see that there are some journalists who are still out there who see that they have power. And we were talking about this with Derek the other day too, where the power that resides in an individual to just get up and do something. It's
greater than ever before.
Yeah, to blog, to vlog, to run a podcast, to do the heavy research that's needed into these criminal syndicates. Like that's really what we've got to have. We've got to have the power of you going out there and getting after this kind of stuff in whatever your gift is. And I think people are passionate about this. I talk about it all the time. It's like, what's your passion in life? What makes you happy? Like I know for me, my passion is doing this, and what makes me happy is exposing these people who would rob everybody of their liberty. Like that's what makes me happy. Like there's something deep down in me, man, that's just like, oh, okay. We were saying it the other day is like, listen, when we can't do this anymore because there's nothing to talk about in terms of bringing justice to public officials, that'll be a win, man.
That ain't going to happen, man.
I'm going to go sit on the beach.
I'd even say that once we get to 100% liberty, again, I don't know how we get there
problems
in this world, but I mean, you can put it to taxes. Once we get to the right tax rate, whatever you think the right tax rate is, you can imagine what you think my right tax rate is.
0.
Yes, but once we get to 0, it'd be good. There'd be less because there'd be less incentive, but it would be good to have a tireless, irate minority being like, better keep it at 0.
Yeah.
If it goes up by 0.1%, we're going to be extremely mad.
When somebody says there ought to be a law, there ought to be a law that if that thing moves off 0, you get thrown into prison somewhere.
Our society should be constructed in such a fashion, but just of culture, that if somebody hears on the street somebody say there ought to be a law, everybody else like turns around and looks at him like shames him, like shame on you for cursing in public.
Just changing the culture of the society, man. We've got an uphill battle, but
so I want to finish going through the bill here because in the end this is about power, right? So you've got one entity that is powerful trying to take more power and take it away from another entity that is powerful too, but they're trying to make sure that there's less power there because we all want to preserve our own power.
You want to talk about a giant nail in the coffin of liberty in terms of you put the legislature and the executive and the judicial in charge of overseeing journalists and media. Man, done.
They already are in a lot of ways because too many journalists and people in the media play this access-based politics where they're nice to politicians and they get bought off with nothing. They get bought off with, oh hey, I'll do an exclusive interview with you. Oh hey, I'll answer your text once every three months. They feel all important. But money helps power exist. So the money part is on line 96. It says that this is a non-paid position, but they get a stipend just like state reps get a stipend. I think right now that's like $179 a day. What they do as work, they'd be able to say when they're doing business. So that could mean taking one phone call on one day. And there are state reps who do this. Like they can justify a full day of $179 by taking one phone call. That's all they have to do. And there's nobody to oversee this. It's just an honor code thing. But on top of that, it says that they will manage and put in procedures to accept and manage grants, donations, gifts, and other monetary awards for the fulfillment of its duties and responsibilities from private and public sources. So an avenue for them to get as much money as they want. Yeah. These will be powerful people. Powerful people usually have avenues to request money, awards. They're calling them monetary awards. And they had the audacity of adding public sources and the word grants in there. We have a few slush funds in Georgia, which there's one called the Georgia One Authority. There's the Department of Community Affairs, and they get allocated millions of dollars from the state of Georgia every year. And a board that is also appointed of those things give out grants. So that's the easiest way for public money to be given to them as soon as possible. The last thing that I find, I mean, this is just the nail in the coffin of the fact that this is not voluntary whatsoever, and the force of government is wholly apparent, and it's based off of two words. When things are actually voluntary, which are still usually just a step towards becoming mandatory.
It's my fault.
Thanks, Shane.
I had pulled up a CNN article here for the next segment here, and I don't know if your computer does it, where sometimes it'll just automatically play. That's my fault.
It's no problem.
I'll edit that out.
Maybe. If not, it doesn't matter. It was kind of a cool little wake me up. But the word may gets transformed into the word shall, like the next session. But here they've used the word shall right away. It's an individual who's interviewed shall have the right. They've established a right, which this is, I mean, so far from a natural right, it's not even funny.
It's a benefit.
They say that the media person, so it's either the person who interviewed you, the head of the company, or any other media outlet who used this interview or something to talk about it. So that means that if the AJC uses a video or does an interview video of Ralston, and we play a minute of it, Ralston then gets to contact us and say, you have 3 days to send me the full interview.
Yeah.
And if we don't respond within 3 days, $100 a day, and he has a right of private action to sue us in court and charge us attorney's fees.
And what happens if you don't pay? What if you refuse?
Well, in here, there's not established an exact criminal code of what happens, but you get sued.
Yeah, they're gonna sue you. They may send you to collections.
They'll send you a bill because it's $100 a day.
Yeah, so they're gonna do those things. So you've got a bill. If a bill goes long enough unpaid, what happens? It goes to collections, doesn't it?
Well, the procedure for collecting here has been established as the private right of action, which would be in court. So slightly different, but it would be pretty easy.
So you don't want to show up for court. Then what happens?
Oh, well, then there's a warrant out for your arrest.
Oh, wait. So a warrant for your arrest. So once again, the boys in blue have been given the extra constitutional power now to come out to your place of residence or where you work or your vehicle or wherever they find you.
And forcibly put you in a cage. Forcibly
put you in handcuffs into a squad car, book you, start a criminal process and a record now of your interaction with the state, and now you have to stand trial. Now, what happens if you will not go with the police?
So you get charged with resisting arrest, and they use more force.
What if you keep using more force to resist their...
Usually, from the videos I've seen and my personal experience, they will do as much as necessary.
Yeah, they'll shoot your chihuahua first.
Yeah.
And then they'll kill you.
Yeah.
This is what...
I wasn't even going that far that fast.
You have to.
But this
you
is
have
the
to with
conclusion.
every time somebody does some nonsense like this is what you have to do.
But here's why that is important. To acknowledge that death is the possible end here is what curtails people, is what is going to curtail people. The cost is going to, the loss of access for journalists who, in my opinion, take the wrong approach is going to, and in the end, the fear of going to court. And if you don't want to go to court, possible imprisonment and death is going to curtail free speech. This is why it does infringe on the First Amendment.
This is every time somebody says, let's do this with government. And if there is a policy or procedure that you are non-compliant with, this is what can happen. This is what can happen with everything that government has control over. Every damn time, man. Nobody sees that stuff.
So that means that even if, let's say, Derek asks us for an interview and we don't get it to him within 3 business days, that's $100. Let's say we get it to him within 4 business days. Yeah. He still has, per legislation, a right to private action in court for that $100 and the attorney's fees at that point. And if we don't want to go and we resist going to court because it was 4 days instead of 3, then that could be the conclusion.
That's crazy.
Now, some people are going to say we're crazy, but I think that there's so many steps beforehand that would make any sane person be like, oh, yeah, that seems a little unreasonable. All I want is for everybody to at least be able to say, that seems a little unreasonable. One of the other unreasonable things here is that unless the person asking, so again, if this is an interview of Ralston, if Ralston says, hey, I want the full interview, any photographs and all that taken, you have 3 business days. If he doesn't specify, you can send it to me by email, it is statutorily, they use the word statutorily mandated that it be by, let's see, I can't find it. Come on, Banks. Well, statutorily by overnight mail. So at your cost, and you're not allowed to charge them. And this is where Timothy Barr tried to do this thing that politicians do and just use this new default. Like, they're happy it gets talked about because then they get to go back. He's like, yeah, you're right. We should let the media charge the interviewee for the cost that they incur. I'm like, you're missing the point.
Completely.
Saab, you're missing the point.
God. But
this is with reasonable people that don't look into the details. That's why I wanted to go through the details.
Yeah.
This lets the politicians off the hooks. There's all this press, and the really smart politicians that actually, the ones who do have an agenda, are happy about this. And then it lets them be like, you know what? This is reasonable. And a reasonable person who doesn't look at the details like, oh, something bad happened. He acknowledged it. He's fixing it. And that's usually the end of the story. Mm-hmm. I'm so happy this has gotten more press than just us.
Yeah.
But that's usually what happens with all these bills.
And, I don't know, Banks. To be in this world that we're living in bizarro land these days. I mean, that's the thing, is it is complete bizarro land.
Well, the world has never not been bizarro land.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was slavery. That was
bizarro land. Really awful.
So it's not that bizarre, because bizarre would be out of the norm. This is just par for the course.
It's just different.
But we live in a society that teaches us that we're in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and that there's liberty and justice for all. So we think it's bizarre, but it's not bizarre. Yeah. We think that we should just be comfortable and assume that everybody's doing things for good intentions. You don't even have to put down a civil servant, as I call them, or a government employee, as I would call them. Yeah. Everybody's going to act in their own interest. It is not even their fault in the end. When you go to work for Burger King, you're acting in your own interest. You're not like, Burger King is the best.
You're not shooting for the stars.
I'm going to sacrifice my life for Burger King. You're going there because they're giving you apparently enough money for you to voluntarily accept the trade, right?
Yeah, you're trading part of your life for some pay.
People who are working for government are doing the same thing. Some might have very good intentions. Some might have very bad intentions.
And some people are just stupid.
The only thing you can count on.
Yeah,
but those people are still doing it in their cell phone. There's very few people who are, maybe because of a mental problem, or they're the most altruistic people ever. I don't know if that exists, but who are not doing things in their own interest. So even if they're good people, they're your grandma, they're your best friend. The system is built that it cannot operate in the best interest of the populace, because if it's using force and taking your money and regulating and controlling your rights for the benefit of society, if it has that power, it is going to use that power not for society, it's going to use it for their own interests, because that's a natural inclination of people. And that's why the solution is not necessarily, it's a good step to be like, okay, we have to make a law to make sure that the politicians can't do this or can't do that. And that's why the First Amendment is great, but the end finality is you need less government so you can have less power that is going to be less abused by the people who are serving their own interests, which they cannot help but do because we're people. I serve my own interest. And I do this podcast because I like doing it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is their interest is the state, because they are the state. And
their interest becomes the state. So I don't want to judge like their internal moral fiber. Like they love kittens and they love their family just like anybody else. Most of them. There are some people who have bad agendas. I'm not like, this is not Ralston, okay?
Come on, man.
Ralston's in another spot. But yes, they become the state.
Yeah, they are the state. And the state is force. It always has been. It always will be. And that force is against me and you and every man, woman, and child that is not the state. That's the problem I have with all of it, Banks.
This is my most weird, I guess, discussion with my sisters, at least two of them, is that they're saddened by the fact that I make the distinction between the state and me. And they make the argument that, well, you're the state.
No.
Like, why?
No.
And they're
and you don't even want to be.
They're honestly, and like their deep felt conviction is that's what democracy is.
Democracy.
We are one, like one for all,
democracy,
and all for one.
They are right. Democracy is that. Democracy is the state. It is force, because whatever the majority wants, it gets, and then it runs over the individual. That's the cool thing about, what you're saying. They can't believe that you don't want to be the state. That's a weird thing.
They find it sad.
Yeah.
Which means it's gotten to this emotional level. Most of us are making decisions, not just factually.
Yeah. They pity you because...
Me too. They don't pity. They are, but because they love me, they're just honestly sad. They're like, I wish you could understand how beautiful it is to be part of the state. And I'm just like, all the examples of the state doing horrible things.
Let's paint a picture. This is
so Shane is pointing a finger gun at me.
We've got a video now.
Well, yeah, but some people are just going to.
Oh, that's true. This is the state, and whatever we do over here on the state, right? We're taking from that guy right there at the point of a gun, no matter what it is. We are saying, hey, we're not equal. We don't have the same rules. You guys over there are going to provide for us some way, shape, or another. And if you don't, we'll come into your damn house and kill you. Get out of line. Go ahead. Try us. It happens every day in America. Every day in America.
But land of the free and home of the brave.
Oh, man.
With liberty and justice
land
for all.
of the incarcerated. And that brings me kind of, I wanted to segue
because this is that's the end of the bill.
Yeah.
As I said, only 6 pages, very short for usual bills. But in this case, it actually is more dangerous because it says, let the board just decide all their rules and stuff.
Yeah. So
it's HB 734, by the way, if you want to go look it up.
Yesterday, it looks like a few people were banned for life from Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. James Woods was one of them.
Well, this was specifically Facebook, so this would be in Instagram and Facebook only. They
right.
put out like a statement,
and I think Twitter did as well. And I'll have to find it here in a minute. But
I wasn't aware of that one.
You've got Farrakhan, you've got Milo Yiannopoulos, you've got
Alex Jones,
and James Woods was another one.
I think James Woods, but I saw
there's more than that.
Paul Jewis Watson, but he was not banned on Twitter. He was banned just on
but
Facebook
still, the fact that it's happening. It'll cascade into the other social medias out there.
Well, it will, but it is interesting to look at the detail of how they explain these specific people for these specific reasons.
Yeah.
And why Twitter hasn't taken Paul Jewis Watson off of Twitter. Not that they care about being consistent, as we saw on that Joe Rogan episode where Jack Dorsey came on. But
and they'll lie about it's just the algorithms doing their job. Trust me, there are some people who are in positions of power over there that if something comes to their attention, they'll just ban them, man. I mean, that's the problem. You get shut down one way or another and banned. Now, we've said it a million times. It's a private organization, all that fun stuff. But I wanted to bring up the rise of the technocrats. And have you read the book yet?
I have not.
It's by Patrick M. Wood. It was written Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of global transformation, where he kind of connects the dots on the largest, most insidious, and most wrenching transformation of global society that the Earth has ever experienced. In this day and age where we're communicating at light speed, where, Twitter is just blowing up. There's just, exponential growth. There's more sharing, more videos, more pictures, more polls, more of everything, where people have this interconnectedness across the world in real time. Things are obviously happening with social scores in China and things like that. I guarantee you we all have social scores here that are kind of being kept behind the scenes.
Well, we do already have a credit score that is backed by government regulating it.
Yeah.
When government regulates something, it makes it a de facto part of the government.
Yeah. And until that score is based on your social interactions in society, though, it's a little different.
Well, it is different, but then you've also got the TSA, and they've got pre-check stuff. I know you have pre-check. That's a form of social score. It means that you're more trustworthy than me, who does not have it.
I'm a weirdo, man. Like, I've probably got as many clearances as I do, the red flags. Or as many lists.
I think in practical terms, there's nothing necessarily wrong on an individual basis of deciding where you want to put more effort or not. But I do think that we effectively have a social score. It's not as concentrated and and controlled and managed as China's is terrifying.
Oh yeah, and the thing is
it's like 25 million people, I think, last year were stopped from taking a plane because their social score was too low in China.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's all good. I mean, so if you haven't read Rise of the Technocrats, you definitely should, because there's a lot to understand, there's a lot to know, and there's a lot to be said in terms of fighting this type of thing, in terms of solutions. This is what Mr. Patrick Wood talks about in Rise of the Technocrats is based on what he believes is the United Nations Agenda 21. And Agenda 21, for those of you guys don't know, it's the UN's shaping of how they want the 21st century to look. Through policy processes and everything that we fund through, stolen taxpayer money to give to the UN.
Well, I mean, we're the biggest country. Of course, we should give them the most.
It's weird,
and we even gave them a piece of American land.
Yeah,
which is insane.
I mean,
literally, a foreign power has invaded America, and we let them.
Invaded. We welcomed them.
That's true.
We welcomed them. And we funded them to the tune of billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars over the years. Hundreds of billions in prime real estate in New York. We've literally, as this all comes to light, it's not conspiracy anymore.
No, I mean, they write Agenda 21. They write the things that they want.
Yeah.
Just like we talk about the things we want. This is not conspiracy. This is open discourse.
Let's fund an organization on our own shores more than anybody else out there. We'll invite some other countries so that they feel like they're part of this, and then we'll reach out, across this globe to implement, the insidiousness that we have, today. And when he goes through this, he talks about his premise a little bit. He says, my premise is that when the Trilateral Commission was founded in 1973, it quietly adopted and modified a version of historic technocracy to craft what is now called the new international economic order. This has been largely unrecognized even to this day. I had never even heard of that term before, the new international economic order.
Did he come up with it?
I don't know if he came up with it or not.
So I imagine what he means is you've got the World Bank that the United States and all modern countries participate in.
Yeah.
You've got the IMF, that's all the
still U.S.
Mostly us.
We dominate every one of these organizations, and we dominate it in a way that we pay for all of it, and behind the scenes we're saying, well, maybe we don't agree with it. Well, if we don't agree with it, Congress, why the hell are we funding it?
It's something that Trump was actually pretty good on during his campaign. He's mentioned it a few times during his presidency, but it's been less and less all the time. But he was like, why are we paying for something we don't like?
Yeah.
Why are we paying more than other countries? Which I mean, that's the minimum argument you should make, is at least make it equal. But it's equal in tyranny that oppresses us. How about we just kill it completely? This is just like the bill we were talking about.
Yeah.
It's not just because it exists doesn't mean that we should manage it and manage the cancer. No, you kill the cancer. You kill the cancer that takes money from the United States, loans it out to other countries with bad economic projections, and then controls them. If you actually want people to be free and you care about people in other countries, which I do. I don't just care about America.
Oh, yeah, no.
I'm not a nationalist.
I care about everybody who's not the state.
America's giving money to the IMF, and all these other countries, Germany and England, are giving money to the IMF, who then loans it to come to countries like Greece and enslaves them to where their people, even if they want democracy, don't get to have it because everything is controlled by these bankers.
And
it's not all bankers are bad. Not all people who are named banks are bad. But a lot of them tend to be involved in this horrific economic enslavement.
Yeah, and if something breaks out to where the people revolt against the government, what happens? The blue helmets go in. The UN, right?
Yeah.
That's us. We're funding that. Those are your taxpayer dollars that are funding blue helmets going into societies where there is, a rebellion. If you wonder why the world looks at us the way they do,
they would look at us even more harshly if they understood all those connections.
Yeah.
There's not the random person in Greece is not thinking, you know what, the IMF funded by the United States and by Germany and England.
Oh, and they're
France,
also in charge of the UN.
And they're also in charge of the UN, that all those are funded too.
And they also run NATO. And the G8.
If they understood, there would be, if the truth was out there, there would be more liberty because there would be rebellion.
So share this and understand that, and I hope, and I believe, Banks, that if Americans actually could connect all the dots and had the time in their lives to sit down and do this type of thing. I know we have more information at our fingertips than ever before in history, but most Americans don't have the time to really sit down, dive deep into this kind of stuff. You know, kids and family and all, and I get it. They're tired. They're paying, you know, ungodly amounts of taxes, trying to make sure that, you know, they're not thrown into a cell or killed by some government organization. And a lot of times at the end of the day, it's just damn depressing. So they don't want to know anything about it. It's like, you know, the red pill, blue pill.
And I still think there's nothing wrong with somebody. And I think they can spread as much liberty as anybody else if they just are like, you know what, I'm just going to live a peaceful life, and my actions are going to be virtuous.
But that here it is, guys. Here is a box. We are giving you a great gift right here. We've wrapped it up. We've summarized everything into this present. All you got to do is pull the bow off and start sharing.
And we even have video now. You can see like the faces and the arms move around.
Here it is, our silly faces.
Well, you can't really see our faces since we're looking at each other, but you can see our arms conveying messages.
To bring all this together, you know, Agenda 21, and to quote Mr. Woods, Agenda 21 is the technocracy's plan for the 21st century, the agent of implementation to sustainable development. The driver is the United Nations. Their perpetrators are the members of the Trilateral Commission and the other globalists out there. The victims are all the people of the world, like we just said. You know, we have obviously compassion for everybody that's out there. But it's to create a post-capitalist. You hear this all the time from people who are progressives and democratic socialists.
Well, it's funny because this illustrates just how academia like develops what happens in politics. It used like in academia, it's postmodernism. It's like, oh well, we were modern, but now we have these new wonderful ideas.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah, post-capitalist green economy that is based on energy production and consumption. This is a creepy thing. So I didn't really understand, but back in the day, and I imagine it was kind of the Fabian socialists that came up with this great thing that we're talking about, because really at that time, you know, we had just gone through the women's liberation and suffrage movement of the 1920s. We had prohibition. Things were not working here, you know, in terms of a heavy-handed state, yet people were rebelling. They were. I mean, there was a ton of rebellion going on through the Appalachian Mountains at that time with, you know, spirit running and everything else, you know, moonshine and all. It's obviously where we get NASCAR. But
we get NASCAR from that?
You didn't know we get NASCAR from the 1920s?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, is it because they had like souped up cars, and then after Prohibition they had to use those souped up cars?
No, so cool? So for Prohibition, what happened is they couldn't transport the shine from place to place, you know, in a manner that was safe. So what they started looking for were advantages, and in that time, mechanical advantages were one. You didn't have a ton of technology, but you were looking at mechanical advantages over your adversary. At this point, what you're trying to do is speed, like just flat out nasty speed. And so you got these guys that are modifying vehicles, and a lot of the modifications that were done by moonshiners were adopted by the big car companies in the end. It's crazy.
That's beautiful. It's like you can't stop. You can't stop liberty. It's like, hey,
can't stop
this prohibition is still going to help the car manufacturers.
And these cucks,
awesome.
You know, these cucks out there. And, you know, the law enforcement, the boys in blue that think that, yeah, I'm just going to follow orders and do things like this. All you're going to do is cause misery. You're going to cause misery in communities that you're supposed to be there to serve and protect their liberty, not keep them safe.
I still don't want to generalize people, but...
Well, generally in America, that's what's happening. And
so the thing that makes me... I was smiling and made me kind of optimistic is that there can be such a positive message. It's like, look, you are not the enemy, socialist neighbor, socialist sister. person who hates Trump, or conservative, right wing, Christian fundamentalists. We're not like, you guys are not actually enemies to each other. You say you hate each other, but you're only feeding into the plan. Here are these much bigger avenues of who is actually like people controlling what's happening in Greece, big agendas that affect your lives.
Yeah.
Those are the people, and that kind of brings us together. And so that's why, in the end, do I think that a lot of law enforcement is making an ill-advised decision to enforce laws that are immoral? Absolutely. Do I like it when sheriffs like Sheriff Mack and some in Colorado and some in Washington State say, hey, I'm not going to enforce at least some of these bad laws because there's so many bad laws. I love it.
They're heroes.
But in the end, I don't think that we are actually the enemy of the vast majority of anybody. I really do believe the vast majority of people on the vast majority of any political spectrum you can think of agree on the vast majority of things. And that is such I think it's the truth, and the truth is powerful, but it's also such an optimistic view.
I think
it can work.
I think in theory, yes, people agree. I think in practice, there is a clear delineation now. I think there is an absolute clear delineation between the state and people.
But there always has been, and sometimes in history there has been more clear delineation.
So the problem is when you have an out of control executive, even at the local level, who will sit there and say, my job, Nuremberg basically is to uphold the law, not question it, not to hold it to the Constitution or anything like that.
Well, that's why I say in the end. Yeah. It doesn't mean that I excuse all action whatsoever. Like anybody who, the other day I had a tax assessor come onto my front lawn, and I was like, please get out.
Yeah.
And we had a nice conversation. But I think that in the end, even if they take wrong action, even if they end up killing somebody for the wrong reasons, in the end, I would hope that they would figure out, that person wasn't actually my enemy.
And let's paint that picture for, if we've got law enforcement out there that's listening, listen, this is what happens. You have people who have tons and tons of money that are extra bureaucratic organizations that are funded by theft dollars and tax dollars. So you take money by theft that people don't want to pay for, because I don't support the UN. I don't support NATO. I don't support any of these organizations. If I could not have my money stolen at gunpoint and given to them, I'd feel much better about all of this. So what you have is extracted wealth that pays for the UN, that puts out policies now that gets funded by our taxpayer dollars. So really powerful people with tons and tons of taxpayer money will implement a bureaucracy, which will implement a policy, which will be pushed down to the local level, which you are now told you have to enforce by a sheriff or a police chief, or, run the risk of losing your job. Not putting food on the table for your wife and kids. This is not conspiracy. This is exactly what happens every day of the week.
Well, this is not just, it's the natural order of things.
Red flags, they're a part of that. This kind of nonsense is a part of that. What we're seeing out there with, people in the technical type, social media type worlds, this is all a part of that.
Use his name. His name is Zuckerberg.
Did you know? Yeah, well, him and Tom and the rest of those guys, the key, there's two key requirements for technocracy, and this was first outlined in the 1930s. I had no idea that.
Well, we have better technology, but we've always had technology. So, fire is a technology.
So one of the two is register on a continuous 24-hour per day basis the total net conversion of energy. We have smart meters everywhere in America now that tell when you're using energy, when you're not using energy, if you're home, if you're not home, probably. When there's active spikes, minus maybe in air conditioning and things like that. Then the other one is by means of registration of energy converted and consumed, make possible a balanced load.
So that's like talking about tax. The carbon credits and so forth.
Yeah.
To create a marketplace of.
You look at who's pushing this kind of stuff out there. You can name them. Your Al Gores, your John Kerrys, your AOCs, and her little new tribe of misfits up there on the hill. I don't know.
So I think that the only problem I have with his writing is that it's very absolutist. I think it's good to talk about these ideas, but he seems somewhat single-minded in that he's like, this is what you need for a I mean, there's lots of different ways that tyranny advances. Well, there's not a single fashion.
No, and I definitely don't disagree with you there. He also talks about a total surveillance of society. This is another specific requirement of the early technocracy, was to provide specific registration of the consumption of each individual, plus a record and description of the individual. A scientific society, and this is a quote, a scientific society cannot run without comprehensive monitoring and control.
A scientific society? See, I have a problem with that too, because science is a good thing.
But think about this in the 1930s, right?
I think what he's, and I haven't read the book, but I think what he's not pinpointing as perfect as he could is the undercurrent. The bad thing is the tyranny. All the tools that are used are just used in the wrong way, right, potentially. And tyranny has a tendency to use good things. Like they used the women's suffrage movement that they mentioned, took it and then transformed it into something later. The neocons have used the Tea Party, took it, all the good intentions, and then used it for other things. This is what they do. They're going to use science to subjugate people. They're going to use energy, which is a good thing, to control people.
So yeah,
I think that makes it easier for people to look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's a possibility, instead of pinpointing, which makes it more in the territory of conspiracy, to where they're like, oh, and that scares people more than just the plain truth. The plain truth is, good or bad can happen with all these things, and tyranny has a tendency to do this.
Yeah, he goes on to state here that quote, every engineer knows you cannot control what you cannot monitor and measure. Right? I mean, social media, there's a record. I mean, I don't know how many years now we've been into really social media. 2004, 2005 was really kind of the uptick of like MySpace and Facebook. And
well, Facebook was 2006, I think, when it started, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
was that YouTube?
It was around there. But I mean, you know, we're talking about that time frame, especially at a slow space. I mean, because 2006, I was out of the Marine Corps. I was back. This is actually late 2005. I was back out at UGA, and you know, kind of in a different class of kids at that time. I was the old man. You know, I was like 26 at the time, and you know, I've got 18-year-olds that are, you know, my roommates, or you know, across the hall, or things like that, and they're like, have you heard of Facebook? And I was like, what's Facebook, man? So, like, I mean, so late 2005, and it was already well established on campuses across across this nation. So, you know, for him to be talking about that, I definitely don't disagree. He goes on to talk about the 3 identical pillars that they have to control, and where they have to be compatible with each other for there to be a quote-unquote harmonious society. Those 3 pillars are economics, politics, and religion. So, Banks, off the top of your head, harmoniously, economics, politics, and religion.
How do those coexist harmoniously? Because I can answer with one word.
That's the question, man.
Consent.
Right. And liberty.
The only way. Yeah.
It has to be like
2 words, fine.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, you know, can you ever in politics, in a state, you know,
well, politics doesn't have to necessarily be a state. It's the civil society, and that civil society could be voluntary. There are lots of transactions that are voluntary. You and me have voluntary transactions all the time. So I mean, so it doesn't have to be. Yeah,
the politics would be the absolute, I guess, absence of politicking. Right.
Well, I mean, politics would still be like current affairs and so forth. In a civil society, you would have rules. Like anarchy would not have laws, actually, which is interesting. So there would still be current affairs and the politics of how one business interacts with another business, how and so forth. So there would still be politics. Politics doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Yeah. No, but I'm just thinking, you know, outside of this, when you start looking at people who are trying to control harmoniously all 3 pillars and shaping this.
If they're doing it with force, I mean, there's going to be consequences.
It just screams Fabian socialist to me, man. maybe the worst of the worst people who were doing genetic engineering, who were doing, programs like, Planned Parenthood back in the day, who were absolutely all about certain types of races being exterminated, and then other certain races being, taken and putting on a pedestal, for lack of a better term. Like this, that's what this. They want to, basically heat the world and mold it to their heart's content.
That's one strategy. People who wanted to push tyranny have had to adapt, because the strategy before used to just be like overwhelming, like subjugation through force. And they had to like adapt and be like, okay, well, there's people now have been rebelling more, and they have more tools to rebel. So now we have to do it through heating up the world and so forth. And nowadays there's even more like information and so forth. So they have to do it through more the propaganda, the Mussolini, Goebbels type of stuff. It's just an evolution, which again, optimistic old me is like, that only looks good in the future, because there's going to be more information and more tools for the free people, which is the majority of people.
Maybe.
I think so. I think it's inevitable.
I hope that it's inevitable.
I think it's even good. I think that I'm not saying that it's all perfect. I think that Facebook and Twitter and Google, I mean, they've got contracts with the government, and that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But it's not. They're not wholly owned subsidiaries of the government, and I still think it's good that they take bad actions. They ban people when I think conversation is good, because then society sees that, and we can react, and there are ways that we can communicate more than ever, even with all the banning and control and ethics bills, which is where this all started, and so forth. So
they also go into, Woods goes into the functional sequences that the technocrats talk about, in their technocracy. The functional sequences being healthcare, which we know they're trying to move to a single payer system, which they moved away from, what we had, which was still socialized healthcare. It just wasn't socialized enough for society to go that way. And so
there's just more and more market intervention.
More and more. And then control over, land and water, Army Corps of Engineers, in the Council on Governments, Agricultural Practices, Bureau of Land Management is already there, education, Common Core, and things like that. No Child Left Behind.
52% of the Georgia budget goes to education. I mean, it's inevitable.
Energy. So we've got the Department of Energy and Smart Grids, transportation, the metropolitan planning organizations, and emergency management. Obviously, FEMA. I mean, they have effectively, with bureaucracies, and probably no. This is not news to anybody, and maybe this circle, but I mean, if there is a utility, I don't know, if there is anything out there, these guys seem to have some federal reach into it at some level already.
Who are these guys?
The government, the state.
Well, the government is the federal government, so of course they have reach because they are them.
Yeah, but it's funny how it fits right into the idea of a technocratic state. And now what you're seeing is this tool that we had that was kind of fun and cool for a while that's taking a whole bunch of people down. And this is where I wanted to get to, by the end of the show, and we're looking at about 1 hour and 23 minutes now.
Okay, that went faster than I thought.
We have this banning of, for lifetime bans for guys that are out there in social media. And now what we also have is a president that is tweeting about this kind of stuff. And have you seen his tweet from
I have not.
Just yesterday? This is 18 hours ago.
About Facebook banning people?
Yeah, it says, I am continuing to monitor the censorship of American citizens, which is all caps, okay? I am continuing to monitor the censorship of American citizens on social media platforms. This is the United States of America, and we have what's known as, all caps again, freedom of speech, ! We are monitoring and watching closely. Here's where we get to again.
Man, Donald J. Trump retweeted Paul Jovis Watson.
Have you seen all the tweets? He talks about Diamond and Silk. He talks about James Woods being banned. He's so surprised to see conservative thinkers like James Woods banned on Twitter and Paul Watson banned from Facebook. Let's see, floods. This goes on and on and on, and now he's retweeting, other people out there who have been, who've been banned. What people are doing now is screaming to the chief executive of America, do something. Do something.
I literally want him to do nothing.
Nothing. This is the slippery slope.
But this is what we talked about with Derek. It's like both establishment sides win. So the Democrats win because then we get government-controlled social media, which is already somewhat controlled. Again, they have government contracts and so forth. So they get more control, and then the establishment right gets what they want too because they want more control. The establishment government in general wants more control.
Yeah. And that's the thing is we have a president who is retweeting people like Jeremy Boring, who says those suggesting Facebook can ban anyone for any reason because they are a private company do not understand the platform/publisher distinction of the special legal protections afforded the former. So what he's trying to do is make the case that when you publish something on their sites, that you have some type of IP or legal claim to that as a publisher, and
so what he's saying is that the publishers right now, through our very, very imperfect system, have an exemption. I'm putting this in air quotes because it doesn't really matter. Have an exemption from libel from what individuals say on Facebook, and that because of that exemption, which is so graciously offered by the government, that they now should be controlled by the government because the government has been so generous in giving this as exemption. No, if companies want to give, like if you want to give a pencil to somebody, and I had somebody say the pencil is not a good argument, like what they write with the pencil is not your responsibility, because if you actually take a liberty view of free speech, it's radical, and radical free speech means you can say whatever the hell you want. That's it.
Yeah.
And this is not going to fix itself until more people like us, maybe more prominent people too, start talking about the fact that libel and defamation and whatever other ridiculous like double speak terms that we've invented to say that, oh, free speech, but no, there's no buts. It's just free speech. But these are people that I can almost feel bad for because they're stuck within a system like, oh, there's a system here, and so they're a publisher and the government controls it. And for some reason, their mind can't go into like, what about if the government just didn't control anything? Stop playing. It's the same reason why the ideas are dangerous, because the bills start, and then instead of being like, let's kill it completely, I like how this has gone full circle. They're like, well, okay, the system already exists and there's exemptions, so no. And then you get to fight. It's there's a quote by somebody that says, what you want to do is have a big government and let the populace think they're free by letting them argue about like these tiny, tiny, minute details while the government just continues to grow because people think that they're actually doing something. Stop arguing over the tiny, minute details, which are based on things that don't matter, things that were created out of thin air by people who did not have the liberty at the forefront. And look at the big picture. The big picture is we don't need the government to establish who's a publisher or not. Anybody can publish whatever they want. And speech does not, you don't have a right to a reputation. You don't have a right to not hear mean things, sad things, whatever it is. Okay?
Yeah. You don't have a right to a platform.
And you don't have a right to use Facebook.
You don't.
On top of it, on Facebook, if you're talking in a more practical sense, you don't have to follow or like anybody that you don't want to.
Yeah. You don't have a right to platforms. You have a right to free speech.
Freaking entitled society, man.
And that's.
And I don't want to get banned on Facebook. I will be very upset if I get banned on Facebook.
You might.
Okay, I will be. You look, control me. Make sure.
Do you see what that says?
Make sure that I don't look for like more government once we get banned, because I will be so upset. But it's the same way that I'm upset about Apple. I hate Apple, even though I use their products every day. But I don't have a right for there to be a perfect.
You got to take David Gay's approach, right? And that's a tough approach. Is you got over 500,000 people who are part of your followership that, and I'd argue that you earn. Like you don't just go out and get 500,000. You earn 500,000 people, and somebody took it away from you. And it's
you
not
just start from scratch.
You start over. You start from scratch, and it sucks.
It's why I like the Stoic philosophy so much. It's because I am pretty bad at applying it.
Yeah, here's kind of my final thoughts on this, and I hope people are listening. Is you want to use Donald Trump as the biggest weapon you think you have, and it's not. Donald Trump could come in and do some things, that are probably unconstitutional. Well, they're going to be unconstitutional, and they may fix something in a very short term. You still have to understand that power, that precedence is going to be set for the person who follows Trump. And, whether it's the next president or president after that or a president after that, if this is somehow a responsibility of some bureau that Congress has set up to give money to, that's going to be who's in charge. Democrats and Republicans will argue that the other Democrats and Republicans are the cause of the problem. Most of the time, it's the bureaucracies in the background that are eroding your rights. Donald Trump is not your biggest weapon here. Your biggest weapon in all of this is the free market. Every individual soul that's out there that can create, that can collaborate, that can come together and produce something that the market wants, that the market sees value in. And that is your biggest weapon out there. You just got to be a little more patient. You got to take a little more time, and you have to let this outrage out. This moral outrage is a good thing. Like I definitely think it's a good thing to have moral outrage where it pushes society, not the state, not the force of government, to change culture. That's the problem we have right now. If you give Donald Trump this power and you're young enough, you're going to live to regret it. You will absolutely live to regret the fact that we gave a power over the internet and publishing and free speech, quote unquote, to the government to monitor, to object to sanction us with. And man, this we're in a weird place, Banks.
So Jeremy Boring, who made that comment that was retweeted by Donald Trump, is the executive producer of the Ben Shapiro show.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro, as much as I dislike some of his comments, specifically the ones where he says that Ron Paul is a little bit of a fascist, just like I'm not a violent person, but that one just makes me particularly upset.
Yeah.
But I don't think Ben Shapiro would. I don't think Jeremy Boring, his executive producer, would win in an argument to Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro would make the case that the government shouldn't be involved in what is free speech in the first place.
Yeah. Which is kind of weird.
Yeah, kind of weird. But it's I just read through a bunch of tweets and he's just retweeted the same thing. People it's this populist mindset that doesn't go deeper into things. I'm not saying that they're stupid, but they're being limited in their thinking right now.
Yeah.
And as you just said, it is going to have disastrous consequences.
And here's the thing is, I had to have this red pill a long time ago, and I'm glad. I think it was my brother that brought it to my attention. So Brett, buddy, I appreciate it.
When is he coming on the show, by the way?
I don't know. Whenever we invite him, he's
I've been waiting.
I'd say he's got an open calendar. He's playing baseball on the weekends, but the nugget of advice that he gave me, and I don't know, where he got it. It could definitely be an original thought. Was don't ever let your lack of imagination threaten, my safety because you're going to use the force of government against me.
Oh, I love that quote.
Right? Like I'm
going to tweet that from our Rebellion page right now.
Just because you can't figure it out and your limited little space between your ears doesn't mean that somebody else can't figure it out. You didn't figure out your computer. You can't build any of this stuff from scratch. Somebody out there working in collaboration with other people through funding and consent can do these things, and they will do these things. You just got to give them some time to do it. The worst thing you could do is cut them off at the knees and remove their ability to enter into the market by using the heavy hand of government.
Is your brother on Twitter?
Yeah, I think he's Hitman Hazel. Follow Brett. He doesn't tweet. Hitman Hazel, I think, is exactly what it is because his first name's Brett.
Got it.
Do you know the wrestlers back in the day?
No. But I'm glad you do, because when we have Gary Vee on the show, he loves wrestling and baseball. So when Gary Vee comes on, Gary Vee's going to come on the show one day. That this is me predicting the future. We need to have you and Brett to talk about those things to keep him on for longer. Like as soon as he's like, hey, I have to go, guys, you guys start talking about wrestling and baseball, and he will stay because he loves those things.
Well, thanks. We're wrapping up, man. Any parting shots here for the listeners?
I mean, I'm very amused by how we piece those two things so well together. Our same conclusion, which is the only conclusion that we can come to, is that the initiation of force is bad.
Yeah.
So it's not government is bad. It's the initiation of force is bad, and government tends to do that a hell of a lot.
100% almost. 100%.
And that's why we just need a smaller government. It is good to be aware of the little things in between and make better policies, but in the end, it's just going to get worse unless we actually focus on the problem. And there are lots of people, and more that are aware of the problem. I like when we can pinpoint big things that can reunite people together instead of there being so much hate. I know that sounds kind of corny, but the hate mongering, the hate mongering is so prevalent on both sides. Yeah. Shane talks about how the possibility of a civil war. It wouldn't be another civil war because there wasn't one before. That's another subject. Ooh. But and I recently listened to a podcast where it's a leftist saying, "Hey, this is how civil war could happen."
That's a future podcast for us.
And I just the fear mongering has gotten to such a level, and that's why I've kind of focused on like the optimism side of things. I think our conclusions have been consistent, so we are still on track.
I love it.
And
peace, liberty, and free markets here on the Rebellion again. What do you know? Consistency across the board.
I'm thankful for everybody who listens and all the emails we get. We are going to do a show soon where we just go through a bunch of emails because we're backed up. There's like a dozen emails and comments we need to get to.
Hey, if you're listening and you found value in what we're doing, go out there and leave us a 5-star review. We need more reviews. If you are doing reviews and they're not coming through, email us at info@rebellionpod.com.
And for those people,
take a screenshot of what you're doing.
Absolutely. For those people who are on Android, you can leave an iTunes review. You can go onto your PC, you can download iTunes, and on iTunes, separately, you can leave an iTunes review that will pop up on our Apple podcast.
We're adamant about it because this is what pushes our podcast to the top. It makes it easier to find for everybody. And when you're racking up reviews, that's how you get big. That's how this starts to change culture. So,
if you have any comments, constructive criticism, questions, you can send them to info@rebellionpod.com, where we're going to do an episode where we do a lot of those. And if you want to support the show, it is patreon.com/rebellionpod.
Yeah. Well, until next time, buddy, it's been fun.
This has been your place for peace, liberty, and free markets.
We love you. We need you.
Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.